Hello, welcome to EverydayHDR.com. My name is Blake Rudis, and today I want to talk about Topaz Labs Lens Effects. It's a very powerful program that you can do a lot with, that a lot of people seem to think that you can only do like selective blur with it, and they don't think they have much application for it in their photographs. But I'm going to tell you there's a lot of cool effects you can do with it, and I would show you the whole program if I could, but you know what? It would take me like 5 or 6 hours to go through just how much is packed into this piece of software. So what I'm going to do is just show you 3 photographs and 3 specific areas that I think are very helpful for my post-processing. Everyone's different, but this is what I like, so we're going to go ahead and go for it. When you download Topaz Labs Lens Effects, it's going to be stored in your filter section. So go to Filter, Topaz Labs, and then go to Lens Effects. Now, the thing about opening up these photographs in Lens Effects, it looks like I opened this photograph extremely fast in Lens Effects, and I did. And it's not because my computer is extremely fast and wicked sick with all of its crazy fast components. It's because I made these 72 pixels per inch in JPEG, so they'd open relatively fast. If you open a 16-bit TIFF in here, that's 70 megabytes. It may take about a minute to a minute and a half to open it up, so don't be exiting out of Photoshop thinking the program's broken. It just takes a little bit of time to render all of the detail that's in that photograph. So the first place I'm going to start here is the center of focus bokeh, which is a very effective tool to use because you pinpoint your audience right to your focal point. Now, it's used a lot in wedding photography. I see it all the time in wedding photography, and this is a great tool right here in Topaz Lens Effects to help with that workflow if that happens to be your genre of photographing. So if you've been into any Topaz programs before, you'll notice that all the stuff on the right hand side is specific effects to what it is that you're working on. Now, the thing's a little bit different with Lens Effects is that if you look on the left, your effect is on the left, your preset within that effect is on the left, and then over here on the right you have your specific bokeh adjustment for the preset that you selected. So just keep that in mind as you're navigating through Lens Effects, because it can get kind of confusing if you're used to other Topaz programs like Topaz Adjust. So I'm going to go into the bokeh adjustments and show you how I like to make my center focus. First thing I like to do is take the transition and knock it all the way to the left. And what that's going to do is going to give me a hard edge, and no, I would never put this on any one of my photographs. The reason why I'm showing you is because it gives me that hard edge, and it gives me the ability to select my center of focus a lot better. So I'm going to knock the width down and knock the height down a little bit so I can get a better picture of what my center of focus is going to be. I want my center of focus to be right here. It's basically right where that president sign is and right where the cars are. Now I want to get the cars in there and the president sign. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the height until I get the cars in there, and then adjust the width accordingly until I get the president sign and the cars in there. Now I can move my transition up. And if I didn't get the whole president sign, I can make the width just a little bit bigger, and then I'm going to knock my blur amount down. So what I'm doing here is I don't want it to be so blurred that it looks like something unrecognizable, but I do want it to take my audience and transition it right into that center focal point. I know I did a couple of different photography faux pas here by doing some selective color and then doing some selective blur, but you know what? I like the effect. I like what it's doing here. It gives me that old school city feel, and that's what I was going for, so I like it. If you look at the original, it's busy. The HDR process brought out a lot of detail in my background that I didn't necessarily want. I had a vision when I saw that area. I was narrowed in right on that red light. I was probably about, I don't know, 4 or 5 miles away from there, but with my 70-300 lens, I zoomed right in that area, that target area for me that I wanted to narrow down into, and now I'm able to captivate my audience as well to see exactly what it is that I wanted to see right here with this center focus. So I'm going to go ahead and press apply, and then press OK. You don't necessarily have to press apply before you press OK, but that's neither here nor there. Now, this photograph to me is kind of mundane, kind of boring. Again, I had my 70-300 lens on, and I just zoomed in on the top of this church. Composition wise, it's not that bad, but it could use some effects to make it just a little bit better. So I'm going to go to Topaz Labs, and I'm going to go to Topaz Lens Effects, again in the filter section. Now for this, I'm going to go into these camera categories here. So before we were on bokeh, and with the other bokeh ones, you can do some very selective bokeh, that would be a whole tutorial in and of itself. So I'm going to move on right here into the camera section. Now, I love the pinhole camera edition. Now, when I was in high school, I played with the pinhole camera, and if you don't know what a pinhole camera is, we basically made this box out of mat board, and we put black tape all around all the creases, and then you make a piece of masking tape on the inside of the box that has a hole cut out, and then you poke a pinhole in that area and then cover that up in the front with a piece of masking tape. So what you can do is basically make your own little camera. On the top of the box, you'd open it up and put in your photographic paper. You'd close the box up, seal it up, make sure that pinhole is covered, and then you'd walk around with that box and find something to take a picture of. When you want to take a picture of it, you'd open up that piece of masking tape that was covering up your pinhole, and you'd expose it. And it was a really random thing. You didn't know how many seconds to expose it for. There was no aperture. You had one aperture, and that was how big you made your pinhole. If you made your pinhole too big, you had overexposed pictures really fast. The idea was to make a very small hole. I mean, we're talking smaller than f/22, so that you could let in the right amount of light. Some of these exposures, I remember going 2 minutes and 15 seconds for some of these on a bright sunny day and still getting underexposed pictures. So I do like this addition to the pinhole camera here. It just brings me back to the day a little bit. Again, with the transition, move it all the way to the left. I always start every one of my processes here in Topaz Labs Lens Effects with the transition all the way to the left so I can see exactly what I'm affecting. So with this one, I'm going to move my width and my height until I get it to a point where it's kind of circular in a way, but still gets a lot of the edges in there. Now the strength, I'm going to knock it down just a little bit. Nope, I'm going to bring it up. There we go. And move that transition over. And you can blur that area too, because a lot of times that's what would happen, is that you get some blurring around the edge of your pinhole. If your pinhole wasn't poked just perfectly, or if you had some residual adhesive around that hole, you'd start to see some blurring there. So this is very accurate to that pinhole camera. I'm going to go ahead and press apply. And now I'm going to do something else too. I'm going to go into the tilt shift. This isn't really meant for a tilt shift. Tilt shift would be more of like if I was overlooking this church, looking down on it from a higher position, and maybe people were walking in and then did the tilt shift, it would start to look like a toy environment. That's what tilt shift is used for. So, but the toy camera, I do like this a lot too. It's very cool. It kind of gives you the idea of like a light leak coming in from the side here with that red coming in on the side. That's very cool. I believe that's, I'm not sure what setting that was they have in here, but you can see if you click on all of your presets to the left, you can get yourself a nice idea of what you might want your photograph to look like. And then on the right, you can adjust more things like the camera shake of that toy camera, the shake angle while it's moving to the left, to the right. You can add some grain to it because maybe there's some film grain in the film that you chose. You can, the vignette strength, if you move it to the right, it's going to be more white. If you move it to the left, it's going to be more black. But at the same time, when you move it over there, it adjusts that contrast, so it looks kind of bad if you don't go too far to the left or to the right. Right in the middle is usually good. I wouldn't go any further than this, I don't think, for using this effect. You can go ahead and change the different regions and angles of where that light is coming in, and again, we can move the transition down to see what's happening there. If we change the size of the region, we're going to see more red taking over there, more light leak coming in on that side, if you will. So that's pretty cool. You can also adjust those regions. So if we go back up to the transition and move it all the way down and then go back to these regions, we can see just how much color is being cast in those region areas. It's very difficult to see the color effect without putting the transition all the way to the left. So what I suggest is tweaking all of your adjustments with the transition all the way to the left on all of this stuff, and then moving the transition in afterwards, so you can see exactly what's being affected in your photograph before you move on. So I'll go ahead and apply that too, because I like what's going on there. We'll go ahead and apply that. Press OK. So now I'm going to move into the next photograph. This photograph is begging for some graduated filter action. I mean, it's just dying for it. So we'll go into Topaz Labs and Lens Effects. So right here in Topaz Labs Lens Effects, you can do some graduated filter action. If you don't know what a graduated filter is, it's normally a piece of glass that would go on the front of your camera, and either on the top or the bottom, depending on where that graduated filter was that would go on the front of your camera. You would basically be, they come in stops. So you could buy 2-stop, 3-stop, whatever, graduated neutral density filter. So start out dark at the top and transition into clear at the bottom. And what this was for is pretty much like the beginning of HDR photography, back before all of these processes were very accessible to us. So what you could do is you'd be out on a landscape, you would expose your picture for the foreground, and normally that would overexpose your background, right? Well, if you put this graduated filter on there, it would add an underexposure onto your background because it'd be transitioning from the top to the bottom. So it essentially putting basically a pair of sunglasses in front of your camera lens just in that one spot so that that area would show up darker. So normally with like a sunset like this, if you shot the foreground, the background would be overexposed. Well, with the neutral density filter on, you'd have a nice exposed background that would match your foreground depending on the amount of stops of your graduated neutral density filter. It sounds very complicated, and it can be, but now we have filters that are built into these programs that can help you with that process. So again, we'll go into that graduated neutral density filter, and over here you can look at the amount of stops that are going to be on the top, the left. I'm going to go ahead and start with the top half. Oh, actually we'll start with the top. Is there a top quarter? Yeah, top quarter at 2 stops, and see what that gets us. So let's go in here and move our transition all the way to the left. Now it's not a whole lot. I kind of want that to be down a little bit. So I can adjust the effect position here and see what's going to happen there. And I'm going to move the amount up actually until I get there. So the preset over here started out at top quarter, 2 stops. What it's turning into now is not necessarily the top quarter. It's actually maybe a reverse of maybe the bottom quarter. Anyway, we can move our transition over to the right. So if we look at our before and our after, this image was begging for some of that graduated neutral density filter. Now, if you have Adobe Camera Raw, you can do the same thing with a graduated filter in Adobe Camera Raw, and it actually is a little bit more powerful because you have a lot more adjustments you can do with that graduated filter. But here, for someone who may not have access to that, let's say you have Photo Effects Lab and you don't have Photoshop, this is great. You know, the one-time purchase of Photo Effects Lab, the one-time purchase of Topaz Lens Effects, and you can be doing some really awesome stuff with your photographs without even jumping into Photoshop or using Adobe Camera Raw. So I'm going to go ahead and press apply on that one. Now what I also like in here is the dual tone filter, and with this dual toning you can almost get a cross-process effect that a lot of people spend a lot of time. I know I've spent a lot of time making actions to make the perfect cross process, and I can't always get it right, but these presets over here actually do a really good job of getting you pretty close to where you might want to be with a cross process effect. Now this red scale 3 is nice because it has just a nice little red haze over the whole photograph, but if you look at the rest of them too, you got this cool to warm dual tone going on here. If you want to move the transition to the left, you can see that the cool tone is at the top, the warm tone is at the bottom. And that matches what would be for this photograph. That does work pretty well. So if we look at our original, our before and our after, it's just getting better and better. It's getting better and better really simply, really fast right here in Topaz Lens Effects. And I can move on a little bit further and keep pushing with this, but I like where it is right now. Just keep in mind that you can move those region adjustments as well. So move that transition over and take that region adjustment, and you can start adding more color to that one area. Again, I say to move the transition all the way over because it's a lot easier to see how your photograph is being affected when the transition is a hard edge, and then as it progresses into the rest of your photograph. And I'm going to go ahead and press OK there. So those are 3 things that I really love about Topaz Lens Effects. I think they've got it right, and it's really simple and really fast. I mean, 14 minutes and 3 photographs are post-processed very well. And as you can see, I didn't do too much outside of the presets that were already set for me. So again, another great kudos to Topaz Labs for making another great product as always. I am Blake Rudis, and this was everydayhdr.com. I hope you have a great weekend. Go ahead and check out Topaz Lens Effects if you haven't already. Have a great one, and I'll see you next week.